My name is Percy Jackson.
So we have a ton of Sea of Monster press stuff to talk about. We kind of started talking about, well, we could probably start off with the character ones that because they kind of finished that series of character ones since we first started talking about it. I think they had only done Luke and Clarice last time, right?
Yeah, it was just Luke and Clarice, and then they went on to do the other four. And there's just so much to talk about because there's just a lot with those other four.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can talk about that. And so the next one that they did was Tyson.
Tyson is a Cyclops. We have this beautiful arc where we show him really coming into his strength. We really honor and respect the Tyson of the book and all the ways of how loving, vulnerable, and sweet he is. He risks himself constantly for those around him. I think the bravery that it takes to do so is incredible.
And this was one that got everybody's feelings, I think.
Yeah.
I think it surprised me that they put in something much later on in the season and things and showed it to us already. That was really cute, and really sweet. But there's a lot to talk about just with him, because this is based on the Odyssey, and he is a big part of that. And watching his video just reminded me of why I like his character so much. And kind of just the uniqueness of him as somebody that's existing in a book series like this. And how so much of him, influences Percy during Sea of Monsters. I kind of temporarily forgot about that. So I was writing little things on our threads, just trying to convince myself that I can write, basically, by writing these things every day. I just started doing it. I just did it for Tyson, and then I was like, I should just keep doing this because this is fun. But so the thing I talked about with Tyson was just the vulnerability of Tyson, and his relationship with Percy is just very, very sweet. And it's very nice. I said, you don't need to be unemotional and angry to be a hero. Everyone was talking about, of course, was they show Percy hugging him and it must be when he realizes that he's still alive. Because he's really emotional in that scene. And the very last thing I thought was it just looks like Tyson standing there and he looks wet or whatever. And I'm I would bet anything that is when he shows up on Polyphemus's island and moves the rock. And where they can now possibly get out of the cave or whatever, and it's just him standing there hello, I'm still alive, whatever episode because it's really fun, honestly, for me to imagine Grover and Tyson and Clarice having scenes together, but especially Grover and Tyson, because I do remember saying this when we read Sea of Monsters last year, that Percy's best friends are Grover and Tyson. That says a lot about who he sees as important in his life. His two best friends are the super, super empathetic, super heartful, just super vulnerable people that are usually off in the corner crying, that other people think are weak or whatever, but those are his best friends. And he will kill anybody who's mean to them or makes them cry. And so it's just it shows that you can't be best friends with somebody like that if you're actually a hard ass ever. And it's just that is not that child. That child is a sweet child that's just being put in these situations where he can't be like that. But yeah, so the thing that I said about the hug thing that I liked about it was that he looks his age.
Yeah.
He looks like a child. Percy during Sea of Monsters is 13, about to turn 14. And that hug looks like a child. It looks like a child that's in big time emotional distress. And even if it's he's so relieved to see Tyson again, that's a way that a child would react to something like that. To seeing somebody again that you thought was dead and being so overwhelmed by that. by realizing that he's actually alive and he's okay. And that's like why I like how they did it, because it's not like a strong manly hug. You know how they do that kind of bro hugs?
Your body in a semi-rigid manner will indicate to your friend that you are in control of the embrace.
A lot of times on TV or whatever, or they, even when they're like
they
crying,
put their arms between each other.
Yeah, it's not at all like that at all. He's just like hanging on to him for dear life, because he's so relieved that he's alive and is just like overwhelmed. And it just made me remember how, we'll get into it later talking about like the siren scene stuff, but I think the best scenes for me with Percy and Annabeth in the second book is, ironically, the scenes that happen like right after Tyson dies. When they think that he's dead, and not like the siren scene part, because that scene honestly makes me sad. I'm probably the only person who thinks that, who reads these books, but that scene just like makes me sad. And so I get why people want to watch it, but it's not one that I'm like super looking forward to like that in the way that like everyone else is. But the scenes after Tyson dies is just, I don't know, it's just they're both really upset. And they both are just being honest. Like, that's when, in the books, that's when Annabeth tells him more of the prophecy. She doesn't tell him the whole thing. And she says, like, I would tell you the whole thing, but I would get in a lot of trouble if I did. But she at least tells him, like, this is why the gods want to kill you. And she says, like, I'm really sorry. And the whole thing with Cersei's island and stuff, they're so freaked out because they're so freaked out by the fact that they think that Tyson just died in front of them. Yeah. And they've never seen something like that before. And so Tyson kind of brings out a lot of that because he's such a sweet person that no matter how they do it in this version of him, they think that he's dead. It's because he was doing something to help somebody. That's what Tyson does. And it's just, his relationship with Percy is just so sweet. And it's honestly one of the most unique things about this book series, that they take the time to give Percy somebody like this and have him be like this, like innocent, childlike, but also can take care of himself and kind of person. They usually book series like this just don't do that, where they have people like Tyson be like a joke. Kind of like Dobby. Like,
yeah, Dobby was what came to mind for me too.
Yeah, like Dobby's like seen as like this sweet person that like does things that makes Harry's life a lot harder, but it comes off as like he doesn't understand, but he's annoying. Like, he's annoying when you're reading the books, even when you find out eventually, like towards the end, like why he was trying to stop him from going to school and things like that. It's still like aggravating, and the way that they talk about him as if he's like lower than Harry and all the other kids. Like, he's a literal slave and like Harry has to like free him in like some scheme or whatever by the end. But he's still never at like the same level as everyone else. It's like all the kids are at one place, but he's like a little bit lower. Like, the way that they talk about how he even talks is like, because he's not human, that he's like not as smart as they are and can't figure things out, or like can't be a part of plans and things like that. And even though Tyson is more like innocent because like cognitively he's younger, even if he looks older, he still is part of everything. He's still taking part in everything. He's not being like pushed off to the side, or like, yes, Percy helps protect him from people that want to kill him because he's a Cyclops, but it's not in a way of like, stay here in this little corner while I do all the big work while you just watch me and cry or something. That's not how Tyson is most of the time, or any of the time, really.
Yeah.
Like from the very beginning, he's protecting Percy with his powers that doesn't get affected by fire and stuff, even if Percy doesn't realize what's really going on and is like confused in the first chapter or first episode or so why Tyson can do that. But he's still doing all that stuff. He's trying to help Percy just as much as Percy is helping him. It's much more equal. And I guess I wanted to talk about him being like a Cyclops because this is an adaptation of the Odyssey. And that's what I think is such like a smart, creative, whatever, like different way to adapt the Odyssey in a great way is to put a character like Tyson in this season. He's a Cyclops. Cyclops are talked about in the Odyssey like they're less than. And that they're like the barrier of Odysseus getting what he wants for like all of the Odyssey. Like the whole reason that Poseidon is hunting him down is because he hurt his son, and he's mad about that. And so the way that people always justify it is like, well, he was just being nice and offering him like white supremacy. And
Polyphemus is well known as the Cyclops that appears in the story of Odysseus. But in a later myth, we do see a slightly different side to Polyphemus. See, Polyphemus falls in love with a sea nymph called Galatea, but she is in love with another, a mortal shepherd. In Greek mythology, the Cyclopes are shown to be lawless and brutal creatures, and this is something even he can't overcome for his love. He grows so jealous of Galatea's shepherd that he kills him, crushing him under a huge boulder. Galatea is so heartbroken at the death of her shepherd that she turns him into a river god so that he is immortal and they can be together forever, leaving Polyphemus still alone and heartbroken. This myth shows that despite being a Cyclops, Polyphemus is still capable of these really complicated emotions, but in the end he is incapable of showing them without brutality and violence.
it was the Cyclops' fault that he got all mad and tried to kill him and his men when he was inside of his house, when he was a stranger and was already eating his food or whatever, and was just like, well, we're waiting for you to come back before we fully steal it. But that's like the general idea is like, well, the Cyclops was just like out of control and scary and was trying to kill his men, so he had no choice but to do that. They're seen as something that is a complication for Odysseus, and that's as far as really they go. And so for Rick Riordan to know that, because of course he knows that, and to instead write his adaptation of the Odyssey where right away the first like new character that he introduces is a Cyclops who is also the brother of the main character that is very protective of him throughout the entire story, and that the biggest emotional moment of the book is when you think that he's dead. He's teaching people and kids who will read this book like, no, you should care about Cyclops, you should like them, you shouldn't feel that way like when you read like the original Odyssey or whatever.
Outside of the Odyssey, like the other like famous Cyclopes are the three like Smith Cyclopes that help make the Master Bolt. And so, it's like they're really only good for their utility, so to speak, in the traditional mythology. And so having Tyson be somebody that you grow very attached to pretty fast in the story also is kind of like they're not just, an extra pair of hands and all of these skills.
And I do remember when we read Sea of Monsters that there's scenes, especially like earlier on before things get super wild with dramatic stuff, that I remember there's scenes where Percy is like straight up just thinking like, what's wrong with Odysseus? Like, why would he just hurt Polyphemus? I feel really bad about that. Why would he do that? And it's just like makes you think like, yeah, if you're around a Cyclops and you realize that some of them could be like Tyson, and then you read the Odyssey, you're like, where am I right now? Like, it just feels like you're in a completely different place. And that was the thing I remembered when I watched that his video is that the biggest this is why I love Percy so much, is that the biggest obstacle they have in the book anyway, who knows what they're going to do with the show, if they're going to make it different, but I feel like this sort of thing is probably going to stay pretty similar. But the biggest obstacle they have with beating Polyphemus is that Percy doesn't want to hurt him because he is a Cyclops and he is like Tyson, and he feels so bad about people like Odysseus and just the idea of hurting Polyphemus, when they're at his island, they're stealing something from him. Even if he's been killing satyrs and stuff like that, he just doesn't want to. I so remember that part of the story that everyone else is like full on yelling at him. Like yelling at him to like hurt Polyphemus. The whole reason why they like Annabeth gets hurt, yes, but the whole reason why things take a while for them to win is because he just stops. Like I remember this one part, he just stops, and Clarice is like, "What is wrong with you? Like, why are you stopping?" And he's like, "Because he's a Cyclops like my brother, and I don't want to hurt him." I'm like, when has that ever happened in a story like this, where the big villain of the season, the real villain is Luke, obviously, but the villain of the season this time that isn't going to be around for longer than this season, I'll go with. That's the biggest obstacle they have to beat him. Not that he's like too powerful or they can't like match him in a fight. They totally can't. He just doesn't want to do it. And it's just such like a different way to look at him. And just like show that conflict, that instead of showing up and being like, "I'm just going to kill you and then take all of your food and then leave," instead he's like, "But I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt his sheep. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to, we have to get like the golden fleece, but I just want to get it and then leave." But he's fine even, and glad almost, that they leave with Polyphemus thinking that he beat them. Because he feels bad about how they showed up and just messed up his whole life. And then left again, because I remember there's a part where he thinks like, yeah, if a person showed up and blinded me and then left, I wouldn't like humans either. That's just such an empathetic way to look at anybody. And like you should, that's what people should do. And having Percy as the main character definitely makes the audience like think about that stuff more. Instead of thinking about them as just like a regular, villain or monster or whatever. But it is like, that's one of the best things about that book, is that everything that you think about the Odyssey is just looked at a little bit differently. In a way that I really like, because it's annoying how people talk about Cyclops a lot of the time. And it's just really cool to see Rick write a story like that like changes things and puts everything on its head so much. Yeah, like one of the most quoted lines from this book, or any book, is the part when Percy's saying that he wants to drown. And that happens in this book when he thinks that Tyson's dead. And I'm not ready for that at all. They've already showed us like little parts of that, like the first trailer from Comic-Con, the part at the end when it ends with like Luke trying to stab him and somebody stopping him. There's like a million little images that show up really quickly, and one of them is Percy crying. And he's like soaking wet when he's crying, and so it's from that part. And I'm like, oh Jesus Christ. That's gonna like destroy. We're gonna watch it on Christmas Eve.
Oh my gosh!
Christmas Eve. I think it's on Christmas Eve. I'm just picturing everyone watching that and just like sobbing for like a half hour. I just love that relationship, because it's just pure, to me, as especially like an asexual person. They're one of my favorite ones to show people like an example of how strong platonic love can be. And that Tyson, throughout all the books, is really one of the best. He's one of the most like consistent characters for Percy. And part of him being a little bit different from everybody else means that he tells him stuff about like Luke stuff that he's not telling anybody else in the third or fourth book, really. And he can tell Tyson stuff like that, because Tyson will just like listen to him and give him good advice, but he won't like tell anybody else. He doesn't have to worry about like what he thinks about Luke, because he doesn't care about that man. And so you can just tell him like like the one quote from Battle of the Labyrinth, when he has the horrible nightmare and he wakes up and he like attacks the fountain, when he's having like a nightmare about Luke and Nico at the same time. And the next morning they're like, "Why are you so tired?" And Tyson, he broke the fountain. That's all he says about all that. Like Percy in that book, they say that he's sitting on the floor of their cabin, staring off, like dissociating for hours in the middle of the night after he saw that stuff, and that's all Tyson says is he broke the fountain. It made him upset. And it's just such a nice, like, that's why he can just tell him whatever. Nobody would know what Tyson's really talking about, even if he did try to tell somebody else what he was saying, and he doesn't. But even if he did, they would just be like, okay. They don't know what he broke the fountain really means, and so he can tell him whatever, and it's great. It's just very sweet to see a relationship like that, especially because everything else he gets from Poseidon is kind of a mixed bag, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even Tyson is somewhat because of what's going to happen with nobody else accepting Tyson. But that's also kind of a part of this vulnerability of Tyson, that he's willing to help people no matter how they feel about him. He's just like, it's so in him to be that good that he doesn't really care.
And I know we said this when we were reading the books, because it does bother me how people talk about Tyson or Percy as if Percy was being horrible to Tyson in the beginning or something, and he's not. Like, he's not at all. Percy never has a problem with Tyson. The thing that Percy has a problem with is everybody else he meets bullying him because of Tyson. And that's a totally different thing. Like, he feels bad when he realizes that Tyson realizes what's going on. But, like, he doesn't... Yes, like, it's hard to go to school when everybody else's school is being mean to you because of Tyson, but that's not necessarily Tyson. That's everybody else. And just, like, how they're reacting to him, that's not fair. And so, like, that's why, like, Percy never takes that out on Tyson. It's very easy at that age, especially, to take it out on the person that's causing those problems. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't, like, get mad at him or yell at him or tell him to go away or anything like that. He gets, like, frustrated, especially when he's at camp and he doesn't understand why his dad would claim him when that puts him in this difficult position socially. Like, being a monster is, like, the worst thing that you can be at this camp, and he just claimed his brother, who is technically one. And so, like, that's what he doesn't understand, but that has nothing to do with Tyson. It's not anything actually to do with him. It's just what everyone else in this world is reacting to because of him. The next one was Grover.
This season, Grover's a lot more confident, and we explore his culture as a satyr. Grover really learns the importance of overcoming your differences. He doesn't give up on himself.
I find that when things go wrong, hope can be a powerful tool.
I am generally, like, so interested to see how him and Tyson interact. Because they've never met before he shows up he's gonna be there on Polyphemus' island before Percy gets there.
Jane Shannon here. Yeah, I'm aware now that Tyson probably doesn't show up until the very end when everyone else is already on Polyphemus' island, because that's the plot of the book. I want them to change it where he's there sooner, because I love Tyson and I want him to be in every episode instead of missing multiple episodes without him. Please don't turn me into the continuity Percy Jackson police.
Really interesting to think of those two characters having a conversation, because we don't really see that very much.
Yeah, not really until, like, Battle of the Labyrinth, when they get paired together.
Yeah, and even then it's like Percy and Annabeth are there whenever they're having conversations, and so you don't get to really see their dynamic completely by themselves that they go off on their own adventure, that Percy tells himself, makes himself a bad person, that they did that. But you don't know anything else. You don't get to, like, see them actually doing that. And so this is a time where, and that's also really interesting to think of Tyson interacting with Clarice, who would be there after being, like, aggressively brought back down to earth by everything that just happened. And so it's just really interesting to think of those three characters having scenes together for any reason without Percy and Annabeth there. It's just them talking to each other. And what they would even talk about. That's really fun. I know that's one of the first things I said when we read Sea of Monsters last summer, that I wanted them to have scenes like that. I wanted them to show us what they're doing on the island when Percy and Annabeth are having like several like crises and things like that. And they will be doing that during this season, so that'll be really great. But I know you wanted to talk about him being like a satyr and learning about his culture, as Arian put it.
Yeah, Arian said we get to see some more of his satyr culture. And it's interesting because we don't really get too much of that before Battle of the Labyrinth. Like, that's really the season where they kind of pack it all into one. And I like that his quest for Pan is kind of getting highlighted here. All of the things about, like, what it means to be a satyr and the nature powers, and that it's going to come out a lot sooner because he is on his own and he does have to try to figure it out.
Yeah, and one thing I liked from the scenes that they showed with him was you have to like pay attention to it, but you can hear like almost like the song of when he uses his pipes for the first time, and he kind of like looks around because it's maybe that is the first time he's ever really used them. And you see, and when he would do that, you would see like nature, like trees and stuff move because he did that. And so it's fun to think that he is getting to explore that on an island like this that is all just like nature, and once he is not tied up in a wedding dress anyway. But like when he's not doing that, or before he does that, that's what he can interact with, is this place. And the posters they put out earlier for the one for Grover, they say a quest for survival. And I know that people are kind of like talking about that, like there's some people saying like, should that actually be Percy's and his should be, and Grover should be the other way around, but I don't think so. I think that Grover's is like literal, like, yes, like everyone in this season has some sort of quest for survival except for Luke. But everyone else does. But his especially, because he's on an island where a lot of satyrs die. Like all of the satyrs that have ever gone looking for Pan, they end up on this island and they are never heard from ever again. He takes the pipes that he's playing from a skeleton of like a dead satyr. And so he's on this island surrounded by his own people who have been killed on this island, and he very quickly figures out why that has happened. And then he's suddenly stuck in the same situation that all those people that had died were stuck into, and it's like I literally have to figure out a way out of this, because if I don't, I'm gonna die like everyone else on this island has died. And so his is like a very direct thing of survival. Like he has to keep up with Polyphemus and how Polyphemus is trying to manipulate him back in this season. Because if he doesn't, he's gonna die. It's literally that. Exactly. It's that simple. Like if he doesn't keep up with it, he's just gonna be dead. And like, yes, some of that is true with the other characters, but his is like especially intense because he doesn't have anyone else helping him. Like the only way I know how to describe that is imagine if Percy and Annabeth were like completely by themselves this entire season. That's kind of the situation that Grover is in. The other characters all have other people kind of around them to help. But he doesn't have anybody. He's just stuck in the middle of this cave by himself with this Cyclops that is trying to kill him, and he's having to lie straight to Polyphemus's face about the wedding dress, knowing that he is, and knowing that Polyphemus knows that he's lying, and just play this back and forth game with him the whole season. And then having dreams where he's talking to Percy, screaming at him, like literally screaming at him, and some of them like, you have to help me, I'm gonna die tomorrow if you don't get here. You have to get here by tomorrow, or else I'm not gonna be alive anymore.
Percy, is that you? Hey, can you hear me? Look, we don't have much time. I was looking for Pan
Like that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of stress. And so for Grover, it definitely fits for him to be thinking about that, about just surviving. And then, of course, the other thing with Grover during the season is they talked about how he's learning how to be a leader because he's there by himself and he has to kind of figure it out. And one thing I brought up with you was the Percy video actually showed a little bit longer clip of when the sea monster, unnamed sea monster thing, is attacking Grover that they showed in a bunch of different trailers and stuff. And it was a tiny bit longer of a clip where you can see that there's more than 2 people that are behind him. And when that happens, and the thing that I thought was, like, I wonder if they're going to do a thing that's similar with Ares, where in season 1, Ares just assumed that Grover was honestly stupid and was just like, well, how I imagine people think like uber vegans are, like obsessed with like plants and animals and doesn't care about anything else and doesn't know anything and is just like talking, but doesn't think he's somebody that could, take advantage of him. And the whole reason why those scenes in the 5th episode is so great is because Ares has no idea that he just manipulated him to the exact thing he wanted him to do.
You're as bad as my sister.
Was she always like that?
Who?
Your sister, Athena.
What do you mean?
Always making things more complicated than they need to be so people will think she's smarter than you.
Thank you. I can't be the only one who sees it, right?
No, not at all.
And so part of me wonders if that scene where it seems like that thing is attacking him is him doing that, because if that is Luke's people, which it probably is, he's a satyr.
Yeah, one of the girls looks like Allison.
Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine that if there is anybody else on this island, they would be Luke's people, because we know that Luke's people are stalking them the entire season. They would eventually figure out where the island was because they know the coordinates. And so I can only imagine that they would end up there waiting for Percy and Annabeth to get there. And then, and that's the only people I can imagine would be on the island that we don't know. But they probably wouldn't realize that satyrs can sense your emotions. And so he would be able to tell that they are lying. Because I'm sure that they're not showing up being like, hi, we work for Luke. We're here waiting for your best friends to show up so we can kill them and then steal the golden fleece from you. I'm sure they're lying to him to try to get him to like help him or something. And so just in my own fantasy, I hope that they're doing that, but we know, as Grover would know, that he can tell that they're lying to him. And that he somehow like gets them in some sort of a trap or something, without them realizing that he's doing that, because that's something that Grover is really good at, from the first season. So it'd be fun to see him do that again. But either way, it'll be really great to see him have his own story. We know he thinks about Thalia during this time too, when he's stuck in the cave by himself before he hears stuff with Clarice, and all that stuff. But it'll be really.
Sorry. That's why like him being like his leadership arc being part of this is so interesting, because that's kind of what went wrong in a way with like Thalia. Was she took control of the situation and he was supposed to be leading them to camp. He was the one who was supposed to be getting them to safety. And I'm not saying like it's his fault, of course. It's definitely Luke being a try-hard and trying to fight everybody. But, he feels like he failed that because that was his job, to lead that group. And she took over and, like, unfortunately, she died. So, I don't know. It's nice that he gets this kind of, like, redemption arc for himself.
Especially because I think that might not be right, but I feel like it's true. I think that was, like, his first time ever doing that. Like, I think that was his first time ever, like, being a protector like that. And so he looked a lot younger, too. And and it was a lot younger. And so it was his first time trying to do it with like big, when I say big, I mean like big personalities like Thalia and Luke that would be not accepting his help. Like that's just kind of how they both are for very different reasons.
I just reread this in The Lightning Thief. His mission was only Thalia. And so, like, theoretically, he could have left the rest of them behind. The poor guy, like, he's so underestimated, but he found every single big, you know, like, he found every single forbidden child that, you know, like, existed at that time. So, yeah, Thalia was the actual mission. And, I don't know. It feels like it's Luke's fault that he fumbled it just like even knowing that Luke wasn't part of the plan of like let's take him to Camp 2.
Yeah, and it's also like Luke was the complication, of course, the whole time of pushing things to the absolute limit. When that was not needed. That one of the things from Thalia that we're not talking about her yet, but I think it's so funny that people think that Percy is the one that's too like dependent on other people, that like, you know, the whole thing that Athena says, you'll sacrifice the world to save your friend. She actually did that.
Yes.
She actually did that. Like, hello? like Thalia actually did that. She sacrificed herself to save her friends. I'm not sure that she necessarily needed to. They'll show it to us in the way that they want it to be seen. So it's up to that once we get that far in the season for us to decide. But at least for what we know, she already did that. She sacrificed herself for Annabeth and Luke, and then later on is still kind of doing that. She pulls herself out of it in Titan's Curse by the end, but she's still that person that is willing to do that. That is willing to put other things aside for people that she feels personally connected to. Which is really, it's just one of those interesting things about those characters. I'm not really sure how people don't notice that. I don't know what people think Thalia's like Fatal Flaw is, I guess, if they don't think that it's control and you know, like personal loyalty. Those two things almost, the control is kind of part of personal loyalty, but I honestly don't know what people think hers is. Like, I'm sure there'll be lots of discussions about it once the show is actually airing and we see her. But I generally don't know like what the fandom at large thinks her Fatal Flaw is, because everyone's supposed to have one. And so she has to have one. The only time I've ever seen people talk about it was on Monster Donut, the podcast. Back when they interviewed Walker, like right after season 1 ended, they started talking about that, and he said he thought hers was control. And I was like, correct, child.
I'm the interviewer. If you had to make Thalia have a Fatal Flaw, which Fatal Flaw would you make her have?
I'm thinking about, so in one of our conversations with Daphne Olive, she talked about how fatal flaws to her are like your greatest strength and your greatest weakness, which I really like as an approach.
I 100% agree with that.
What do we think Thalia's greatest strength is, Phoebe?
We've seen what got her killed already, so her fatal flaw should be in that scene.
Yeah, like willing to sacrifice your life for people you love, maybe.
I'm gonna throw something out there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with like independence almost. Like she really wants to like be her own person and like only rely, like self-reliance basically.
That's a good one.
I could see, and not wanting to join the hunters.
Yeah, but I feel like she joins as a lieutenant, right? Like she doesn't join to be a part of a group. She's to like get her, regain control, right, of her fate instead of being the prophecy king.
Yeah.
She always has to be in control.
So I hope people start talking about it more, because it is really interesting to think about.